Fridays with Friends crew. Thank you. Thank you for coming in and joining us week after week. We certainly appreciate it. Today, again, I say it's every week, but we have great guests. What are you going to do? So we have a fantastic guest today, Morgan Fox. He is from NORML. Yes, that NORML, the National Organization for the Reformation of Marijuana Laws. Did I say that right?
Reform of marijuana laws, but
reform of marijuana. Okay. So, Morgan, thank you for joining us, man. I know you're a busy guy, and I know it's all keeping you busy, but thank you for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
And if I got this right, you are the political director for NORML?
That's right.
Okay. We're going to get into some politics talks. I think everybody wants to hear about that. But before we do, please kind of give yourself a formal introduction. I kind of introduce you, but give yourself your formal. Tell us a little about yourself and your story and your path that led you to NORML.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, I am the political director for NORML, which is the oldest and largest cannabis policy reform organization in the country. Started back in the early 70s, and we've been working primarily as a cannabis consumer advocacy and lobbying organization. We also have chapters in most states as well as around the world, even as far as South Africa. So we're really happy that things have been moving in the right direction, but there's still definitely a long way to go. Me personally, I actually got into cannabis policy reform, partially as as a consumer who felt that the way that cannabis was treated legally, particularly compared to much more harmful substances like alcohol, was a travesty. And then got to see it firsthand after getting arrested for possession a couple of times when I was in early college. But the thing that really kind of galvanized me and turned me into an advocate was sentencing disparity. I would be in court and there'd be a bunch of other people with the exact same charges, exact same history in terms of previous offenses, meaning like none or just like a one or two possession beefs. And I saw that people that didn't look like me were getting much, much harsher sentences. I'd get a slap on the wrist, and people of color were getting significantly bigger fines and sentences, including jail time. And so I started doing more research into the disparate harms caused by prohibition, whether it be arrest rates or sentencing disparity or any number of other things that are tied back to prohibition, and knew that I had to get involved in some way. So shortly after college, I got a job as an intern at Marijuana Policy Project. Then ended up staying there for almost 10 years, went from intern to communications assistant, and finally ended up as director of communications there. Then in 2018, I moved over to the National Cannabis Industry Association, where I was the director of media relations for a little under 4 years before deciding to pivot a little bit more into direct lobbying and moving over to NORML. So here I am.
That's awesome, dude. That's a really, really, really great story. And it's funny that, we hear things in the news, like there's sentencing disparities and this kind of stuff. But it's interesting that you were actually brought into the system and saw this face to face. Like you saw this yourself. It wasn't just something you heard from a friend or you read in an article, and then you decided to do something about it. And that deserves applause. Thank you very much.
It happened every single time I went to court. Didn't matter which judge it was. It didn't matter what city it was in, every single time.
Well, there definitely is a plan, and the plan appears to be working. So, and this plan has been in place for most of our lives, all of our lives. I just turned 50. So Nixon administration I was born into. So this is kind of where all this stuff was born. And we're glad to have you there. We're glad to have people like you fighting for things like this. And we'll get to this a little bit later, but I know there's more to your job than just that. Clearly, you're a cannabis advocate, and we almost thank you for your contribution to the culture, especially on the legislative end. And you talked about how far your advocacy goes. Like, are you a cannabis advocate? Or are you like a cannabis advocate? You know what I mean? Like, what is like how deep does this advocacy go?
Well, I mean, I've dedicated my entire career to it so far. So, maybe at some point I'll move into a different field, but I'm in it for the long haul. And, there's always going to be work to be done. I'm glad you mentioned that, in this space, I have met so many of the most passionate and effective advocates it's not even funny. I mean, the cannabis policy reform movement is made up of some really wonderful and truly hardworking people. So I
Yes.
count myself lucky to be among them.
And all over the spectrum, I think there's kind of like this misnomer that everyone is part of, like, they're just like their friends look like Cheech or Chong or something, and we're all just kind of like, oh. But no, like, people from like high-ranking, professionals and CEOs and on down to, like, you're in college, you know what I mean, or even, young. I'm sorry to say younger students, but let's be real, we all know where we all started, So, but I think it's really impressive. Now people are getting to this industry, and you made a commitment to this, like in the late, the late part of the first decade of 2000s, like, like late 2000s, before the 2000 teens, like, you were actually committed to this industry, and that deserves another round of applause, I think. So thank you.
I mean, it's amazing seeing how far we've come in that period of time. I mean, when I first
Yeah.
started, there were like maybe 9 medical states. I mean, it's just insane how much progress we've made. But you got to put that in perspective. Think about how much more work we still have to do. Even after legalization, there's still going to be a lot of work at the state level. There's going to be a lot of work to be done to make sure that the pendulum doesn't swing back, and to try to increase protections and increase people's rights. So, I've always found that the more, like, every single time we win something, it creates a new set of issues that we then have to address. And a lot of these things touch on just so many different issues. I mean, it's difficult finding something that cannabis policy reform doesn't touch on in some fashion.
No doubt. No doubt. That's the God honest truth. And to the point of what you said, I read an article today. It's talking about a study that came out that shows that where there is legalization, like, things like alcohol abuse and opioid abuse are down. I don't know what else anyone else needs to hear. Like, if we're actually in a war against those things right now, I just say war, I use that term kind of loosely, but if we're trying to combat, opioid overdoses in this epidemic, then it seems like this is the perfect vehicle, like cannabis and hemp would be the perfect vehicles to do that.
Well, this is just one of the many issues where opponents of legalization have predicted these terrible outcomes, and basically saying the sky is going to fall, talking about the gateway theory, and saying that we're sending the wrong message by legalizing cannabis, and it's going to lead to increases in other drug use or massive increases in teen use. And none of those things have happened. In fact, in general, the opposite has happened to some degree or another.
They have, but with alcohol more so than anything else, more so than cannabis. Yes, like everything you said just now applies to alcohol.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's just it's really funny watching the opponents have to constantly pivot and move on to different talking points when the data ends up showing that they were wrong all along.
You're wrong all along. 100 years we've been doing this, and I mean, not even just like what THC based cannabis, but like, we're a CBD company. I mean, hemp in itself has the power and the ability to change the world with so many things, so many applications that you can use it for. I mean, it just seems crazy that we need to count all the dollars that we've spent on, say, just this war on drugs, but all the, like, plastics and synthetic fibers and all this crazy stuff. Like, we'd be a much wealthier country, I gotta believe, that we just gone with hemp 100 years ago. That's call me crazy.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
I assume that most people think that you're just working on cannabis legalization all day, but I gotta believe there's more to what you're doing over there. Kind of talk about, like, how far beyond, like, legalization and social equity issues as it pertains to laws and such. What do you say, like, the most underrated or underestimated aspect of your work?
Well, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, getting to work with amazing people, and also I kind of like seeing how the sausage is made when it comes to like federal laws and whatnot, as well as state laws too. But I mean, really, I think a big portion of my work is in coalition building, and talking to people and hearing their stories and working with them to figure out strategies for how to overcome these outdated policies. But in terms of policy, aside from legalization, or I guess more accurately, descheduling or removing cannabis from the Schedule of Controlled Substances in the CSA. A lot of the stuff that we work on is kind of incremental things, like removing barriers to research, or allowing access to banking and financial institutions, working on civil protections. I mean, as a consumer advocacy, NORML is, first and foremost working on legalization and helping to undo the harms caused by prohibition. There's a lot of other aspects that that go into it as well, particularly when it comes to things like civil protections. Making sure that cannabis consumers are not discriminated against when it comes to housing or education or employment or custody issues or healthcare. The list goes on and on. Professional licensure. All of those things are things that are going to need to be addressed both before and after federal legalization. Not to mention that we still have 32 states that have not made cannabis legal for adults. So there's a lot of work to be done at those levels, as well as post legalization, working on the regulatory structure to make sure that there are low barriers of entry to small businesses, making sure that the tax rates are not exorbitant. The list just goes on. And sometimes people ask me like, what are these organizations like NORML going to do after federal legalization? And I'm like, just thinking to myself, like, that's when the work is going to really begin.
Right.
At that point, we just become a lobby like any other group. Where it's like the steel lobby or orange growers lobbies.
Right.
These businesses, there's still an alcohol lobby, despite the fact that prohibition ended almost 100 years ago.
No doubt.
So tons of work still to be done, and representing our stakeholders and our constituents is going to be an ongoing project. I would wager that after federal legalization, there will be a handful of states that continue prohibition policies for decades, and we saw the same thing with alcohol. So I mean, there's definitely going to be plenty of battles to fight.
Well, that is, it kind of makes you feel. It feels good to hear you say these things, because you bring up things that people don't really consider or don't really think about. You're like, yeah, I'm sort of like, yeah, that's going to be an issue too. Like, yeah. So, yes, you bring up. I'm glad I asked that question. You brought up a lot of good points right there. I think that, and I think that this is stuff that people want to know. The big question, of course, that we all want to know is, and especially anyone that's voted for Joe Biden, anyone that has. When can we expect him to pull this trigger on federal legalization?
Well, he can't really do it unilaterally. Congress is going to have to take the lead on that. What the Biden administration could do, and what it should be doing, is fulfilling its campaign promises in regards to issuing pardons and expungements for federal cannabis convictions. That's something that he could do with the stroke of a pen, as well as creating pathways within DOJ to be able to help fast track that stuff and facilitate those things to do it en masse. Obviously, there are way more arrests and convictions at the state level. I mean, the vast majority of them are under state law. There's really only, I think 1,000 or 2,000 people arrested under federal law every year for cannabis, whereas with at the state level, nationally, you're looking at between 300,000 and 500,000 people every year, sometimes more. But it would definitely be a step in the right direction, and I think be a strong signal. Plus, it would directly impact those people's lives who were eligible for getting their federal charges removed or getting out of prison early, things like that. We'd also like to see direction from the administration to the DOJ and Department of the Interior to officially state that they're not going to be using resources on state legal or tribal legal behavior. In practice, that has generally been the case, even after the Cole memo was rescinded by Jeff Sessions back in 2018. But I think that having that additional assurance would make everybody rest a lot easier. Until Congress actually acts and ends prohibition, just knowing that the official policy to U.S. attorneys and federal prosecutors around the country is to not waste resources going after people that are state or tribal compliant. I think that at least in the area of Department of Interior, we've been getting, while DOJ has generally been pretty good in the recent past, and even under the Trump administration was still pretty solid, because I think that U.S. attorneys and federal prosecutors have learned that it's a waste of their time messing with state legal operators or individuals. But we've been hearing reports about rogue Bureau of Indian Affairs agents busting up like tiny grows on tribal land and harassing patients and things like that. And that sort of stuff needs to stop. And it won't stop until there's policy in writing. That's not legally binding, but at the very least, it's a strong indicator to employees of those agencies about how they should be behaving and going forward. The problem is that that's not going to happen until they get the word from the Biden administration. Merrick Garland, I'm sure, would be lining up to issue such a memorandum tomorrow if he got permission from the Biden administration. But without that, he's probably not going to do it. Same thing with Department of Interior. So, and these are really small things that the administration could do to live up to its campaign promises and to show Democratic voters that he can actually get things done. The problem is that, while I think he understands the issues surrounding prohibition a little bit better than he did prior to the campaign, he's still not there yet. I mean, I don't think he may ever be because of both like his familial issues with substance abuse, as well as the fact that, he came up at a time when reefer madness was, gripping Congress. I mean, he was partially responsible for some of the harshest drug laws in history. And while I think that he probably recognizes some of the folly of that and is getting a better picture of the harms that those policies have caused, I don't think that he's ever really going to be truly convinced that cannabis isn't bad.
I think with a lot of the boomer generation and older, there is definitely the Nancy Reagan message kind of clings to their head. Like they just cannot see the good in cannabis. I have these conversations with my parents, and I don't know. I think I kind of get the impression that there's like a slow turn happening. Like, all right, well, maybe this isn't that bad, but like I said, it's a half a century, and like we're still having the same conversation.
Yeah,
I mean, still develop.
Sometimes people just can't get out of that mindset. But on the other hand, older Americans are the fastest growing consumer demographic. So, and I think largely because of much better information about the health benefits that can be achieved through cannabis products. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's going to be very difficult, even with a lot of people who are absolutely in favor of legalization being in Biden's inner circle. Getting him to be proactive on it is something that I think we might be pretty far away from. However, this is something that, no matter what party you're in, if you lead on this issue, you are going to see some bumps in the polls. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter because we see majority support across the political spectrum for this. And I mean, overwhelmingly among Democrats. So if you're Joe Biden and you want to show the American people that you are going to be responsive to the voters and support the overall prestige of the party and help all of the people that are up for re-election in some very, very tough races, this is a way to help start boosting those poll numbers.
Not to mention, like all the things that you're talking about, like with Build Back Better, jobs as it could provide, all the science and innovations that come out of cannabis and hemp technology. I think it'd just be a boom for this entire country. And I know that other countries are watching us. I got to believe that you hear, like you talk to other people from other chapters that are outside the United States. So what are you hearing from some of your peers like in NORML or in other organizations that may be campaigning for legalization or some sort of reform of laws, say in Greece or Australia or and other places like that?
Well, I mean, I'll be honest. Some other countries are surpassing us. Cannabis is only legal for adult use in a couple of places, but that number is growing. I mean, we're looking at it being legal in Germany very soon. And we're also looking at countries that might not be making like possession legal, but are entering the industry purely for export purposes. Right now, like Brazil and Zimbabwe and Colombia are moving full speed ahead on cannabis production for export to other markets, particularly for medical markets. And I think that some countries might be looking to the U.S. in terms of, you know, support for treaty violation, basically, because of the single convention on drugs. But and they don't necessarily want to step out of line if the U.S. doesn't. But I think a lot of people are just, you know, kind of ignoring it. And I think we're going to see more and more international movement on this issue. And that's unfortunate because without change in federal policy, we're going to start seeing other countries wildly surpass the U.S. market and develop a you know, strongholds and solidified market share in the global marketplace, while the U.S. gets left behind.
In a country where we clearly have the best product, I think the planet has to offer. It's absolutely insane. Maybe like when you say it that way. Mm-hmm. So let's say we did have federal legalization, 50 different states, 50 sets of laws. Like, what does that look like for most of us? It seems like it's going to be like a big old cluster, you know what, for a while.
Well, honestly, I think that any sort of federal regulatory system is going to give a lot of leeway to the states. And so far, states have been doing a really good job of regulating cannabis. And even with the patchwork of laws, that hasn't really mattered too much because interstate commerce is not legal. So all these markets are siloed. Right. That is going to change once interstate commerce is legal. And there's a lot of debate about like whether that should be slow walked and gradually implemented or whether it should be allowed immediately. NORML's pretty agnostic on that. And I think that there's good arguments in favor on both sides. But eventually interstate commerce is going to be legal in some fashion. And at that point, it's going to require somewhat of a uniformity. But I think that, you know, very much like the alcohol industry, you know, states are going to have a lot of independent control, but there are going to be some things that are required to be universal, such as, you know, certain warning or THC symbolism on packaging, some rules about advertising, testing and safety protocols, you know, various things involving applications for FDA approval for cannabinoid pharmaceutical drugs. You know, there are going to be some things that the feds are in control of, but by and large, I think the states are going to be able to continue doing what they have been doing, and we might see, you know, some gradual uniformity because these states are talking to each other, and more they're learning from each other's mistakes and learning from each other's successes. So you're starting to see more uniformity just popping up organically. And as these states are allowed to be able to do business with each other, I think that that's only going to increase. But there will definitely be a fair amount of autonomy from state to state in terms of what they're allowed to do. And, you know, we might see things very much like with alcohol where, you know, say if you're growing cannabis in California and you want to sell it in Utah, you have to get approval for that product and for that business to be able to distribute within that state, something like that.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that makes sense. And that's pretty American, I think, you know, whereas the states get to, as we've always been. Yes, we are a nation of 50 little, I guess if we were Europe, we'd be like 50 little countries, but we have 50 little states here and, you know, some are bigger than others, but it's always been that states kind of have say and you know, people in Rhode Island cannot be the same as people in Texas. It's just not possible. Just, you know, different factors that impact our lives.
And from a business perspective, it's certainly annoying to have to do that. And from a consumer perspective as well. I mean, when I first moved down to DC, I could not find my favorite Ohio brewery anywhere. But within 2 years, they had gotten distribution rights in the district, and you know, now I can find it in pretty much every store. So you know, I think that we could probably expect to see some similarities to that within the cannabis space. You know, I think what I'm more concerned about are things like possession caps or potency caps, where if one state decides to implement a potency cap of say 10%, and you know, somebody from another legal state goes to that state and the flower that they have on them, you know, maybe they have slightly too much on them. It's, you know, totally legal in their home state, but maybe like a couple of grams too much in the state that they're visiting, that might trigger, you know, criminal or civil penalties. Same thing with like things like potency. So those are the things that I'm really concerned about when it comes to disparities between state laws.
Wow. Again, something I never would have thought about. That's really, that's pretty good. I never would have thought about that, but yeah. That makes sense. And you don't really think about this with alcohol because, it's not like, well, maybe every now and then when like you go to places that have like dry counties and you're not, and you kind of, but you drive from state to state with a bottle in the back, you wouldn't think twice about it.
Yeah, I mean, most of the places don't have like even dry counties, you're still allowed to possess it. You just can't sell it there. But there are some places that have things like keg laws. So, you're only allowed to possess like a certain amount of beer at a time or something like that. And, it's usually just a tiny fine, but, there's still a lot of holdovers from prohibition. And, in some cases, it might come with criminal penalties. So those are the type of things that that advocates on the ground really need to be paying attention to and that we may have to address under federal law at some point.
So I think that we are all aware of the industries that are against cannabis and hemp legalization that have been kind of lobbying against. Most of them are pretty familiar. Like alcohol, pharmaceutical, tobacco. Are there any other industries that are kind of pushing against legalization that we not be thinking of?
Well, I think that with alcohol and pharmaceutical companies, a lot of that opposition has really subsided significantly. I mean, back in the day, pharma companies were donating heavily to prohibition groups and anti-drug groups like Drug Free America Foundation and things like that. And I'm sure that alcohol companies were doing so to one degree or another, or at least lobbying against such changes because they were worried about competition. But I think that aside from a few holdovers, most of them are actually interested in seeing legalization happen so that they can participate in the industry in some level. The groups that I don't think get enough attention for their opposition are law enforcement associations and addiction treatment groups.
Wow.
Yeah,
that makes complete sense if you think about it from a dollars and cents standpoint. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, your average, beat cop probably doesn't care about cannabis at all and doesn't care about legalization. They might not like cannabis users, and they might be annoyed that, by removing things like the smell of cannabis as probable cause for a search, that it's like supposedly making their jobs harder, but really just making it harder for them to harass people. But also, law enforcement organizations when you get to the higher ups, like the chiefs associations and FOP and things like that, they have a vested interest in maintaining prohibition because under current federal law, they get significant amount of grant money that is tied directly to things like seizure amounts and the amount of arrests that they make and things like that, and they get the fancy toys from DOJ and from the DOD. They get huge amounts of burn grant money. They get tons of overtime, even at a local level, just for making these busts and being able to having to go to court. They get overtime for that. They have to stay late and process people. They get overtime for that. So there's definitely a financial incentive there. And plus, generally, when it comes to cannabis, unless there's an organized crime component, it's a pretty safe bust. And fairly easy most of the time. It's fish in a barrel. But the other group, addiction treatment folks,
pointed at you. She's just like, yo, dude, what's going on? That's funny. Sorry.
But the addiction treatment folks are really problematic and really insidious because in a lot of places where prohibition is still the law of the land, there are laws on the books where people that are busted are either forced into treatment or are given an option of being sent to treatment instead of doing jail time or instead of paying some sort of a massive fine. And so these companies have direct contracts with state and local governments. So, and they not only get funding from the individuals that are forced to go there because you have to pay for your own admission, but they also get a ton of money from the state and local governments too. And these are patients that require relatively few resources on the part of the treatment centers in order to deal with. So, I mean, it's easy money for them and it's guaranteed money for them. It's just a huge income stream. Meanwhile, it's taking up beds in treatment centers that are actually needed by people with serious problematic drug consumption patterns. And in the midst of an opioid epidemic, that is really disgraceful. But these, the associations and individual companies that are involved in what I look at as basically a kickback scheme are constantly lobbying against legalization because it will take away a huge revenue stream for them.
Of course. And then you got this pipeline. You don't even have to go out and market or for customers. They just send it right to you. You know?
Mm-hmm. And I think it's really telling that a lot of the like the big organizations that are fighting, like the nonprofits that are fighting against legalization, your Project SAMs and whatnot. A lot of their model legislation involves mandatory or compulsory treatment and hospitalization for arrests. So it's really telling.
That's really telling, and that makes a heck of a lot of sense. So what can we do? What can the regular people do to help you, your cause, your mission to encourage federal legalization? Any particular like House or Senate members that, like we're not like, campaign outside of their house or, or anything like that. But what is there people that we can contact, that we can motivate, that we can encourage?
I mean, at least in terms of Congress, talking to your lawmakers. Citizen lobbying is the #1 most effective thing at changing minds when it comes to Congress, because at the end of the day, while all politicians might have vested interests in a lot of places and have friends that they are responsive to, or special interests that they're responsive to, at the end of the day, it's the voter that they need the most. And so, they do take that seriously. I mean, I know lawmakers that will not even take calls from anybody that's not a constituent. So just reaching out to your lawmakers and telling them to support sensible cannabis policy reform. And you can actually do that pretty easily on NORML.org about specific legislation or really just general issues if you go to our Take Action page. So really strongly encourage people to do that. You can even go to their the individual lawmakers' websites and use their direct email contacts, or you can call their district or their DC offices. The more people they hear from, if it's a constant drumbeat, and the folks that are on the phones are like talking to their supervisors and saying, "Oh, hey, we got 10 calls about cannabis today," that sort of stuff starts to trickle up. And I mean, it's one of the most effective ways of getting lawmakers to co-sponsor bills, or at the very least, vote in favor, or, barring that, just abstaining from votes about things that they might not be 100% in favor of, just so that they don't see anger from their constituents about voting against them. You can, and like I said, citizen lobbying is really just like one of the key things that anybody can do. Another thing is a little self-serving, but like kicking a few dollars to organizations like NORML and other groups that are advocating on behalf of this. I mean, honestly,
self-serving.
We work at nonprofit wages, but we work our butts off. None of us are getting rich doing this. Most of the time, we're not. The people that are sticking around in the advocacy organizations don't have, cushy industry side jobs or anything like that. But we're in the trenches every day, and we have the knowledge and experience to be really effective at these efforts, and to help be able to wrangle citizen lobbyists as well, and point them in the right direction and provide them with the information they need to be more effective as individuals.
I believe that this culture is living a hell of a lot better in 2022 because of NORML, because of the work that you've been doing over the last 50 years as an organization.
I appreciate it, and hopefully we can continue moving up.
Paying back, if you will, paying back and paying for it, if you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's something as simple as like, volunteering at an event or something like that, or at least in NORML's case, reaching out to us and trying to start a chapter in your city or your state.
That's awesome. See, I'm glad. I'm really glad you're saying this kind of stuff, because I think that most people don't know. They don't know what they can do. I think we just got to wait on our politicians to make these decisions for us. So thank you for sharing that.
No, we drive their decisions. We're not always successful, but it's the people that have ultimate power. You just have to apply it in a focused and effective manner.
It doesn't, and as you know, it doesn't always feel like that to the people. So you guys listen out there, understand that you do have more say in this whole thing that you may think. We collectively, we get together, we voice we put out our voice. They have to listen to us. You're absolutely right.
And I mean, we're coming to a groundswell moment where, we already have, almost a little over 2/3 support for legalization nationally. It might not be the same in every state, but if you look at us as a country, and, but regardless of that polling, if we don't actually reach out to our lawmakers and tell them that, they're not going to pay attention.
No. They're absolutely not, because there is money in prohibition. I mean, in a sentence, that's why we're here.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot more money in cannabis freedom, I think, and we just have to show them that.
I think so too. You know, you got to change a couple perspectives. So you know, you're passionate about this, and is there like a run for the congressional seat in your future? Like, is this going to lead to someplace? Like, where do you want all this to take you when it's all said and done?
Oh, heck no. I've spent enough time around politicians to know that I do not want to be one.
It doesn't even look good from the sidelines.
I mean, honestly, I am exactly where I want to be. And, you know, maybe a few years down the road, once I accomplish some more personal goals that I've set for myself when it comes to legalization and ending prohibition, maybe I'll start pivoting into something else. But I mean, like I said earlier, this is a fascinating issue, and it's something that I'm personally passionate about. And you know, I learn something new every single day doing this. It's always interesting, even when it's disappointing and frustrating. It's always fascinating, and you know, I wake up every single day excited to be able to get to come to work, and I don't know too many other people in fields like that. So.
No, I think a lot of people in cannabis feel that way, though. Amazingly so. Yeah, more than anything I've ever heard in my life, these stories over the last few years of people like, I just love what I do. I just love what I do. You know, you don't hear that in other industries.
And I mean, it is frustrating, and it is a slog, and it is difficult. But
it is.
You know, you know, the struggle is the glory, right?
Yeah, I mean, we all. I gotta say, and I don't know everybody in this industry, but it seems like we all really believe in what we do. Not all of us. I know that's not the truth, but a lot of us really believe in what we do. We really, this love was founded before we even knew there was an industry. You know, it's just love for this culture, this product. You know, these two plants, these cousin plants that grow side by side and are benefiting people all over the world and have been for millennia. You know, it's just, I don't know, just all just seems like we're just spinning in circles sometimes with the whole thing. But thanks to you and NORML and organizations like yourselves, we are not spinning in circles. You know?
I mean, everybody that's involved in this space, no matter at what level or in what capacity, is doing something to make the world a better place. And honestly, it's exciting. We're making history here. You know, this has really never happened before. I mean, everything is brand new, and being able to be a part of that, no matter what in what capacity, is I mean, it's a privilege.
It really is, and it's very exciting. It's heartwarming. It's like you get up every day. Not every day you don't feel like a warrior, but most days you're like, yes, like I'm doing the Lord's work, if you will. You know, this. What do you do when you're not doing this? Like, what do you do in your free time?
Mostly just chasing my kids around. I got 2 under 4, and they are a handful.
Okay, 2 and 4.
Yeah, I mean. I try to get out into the like the beautiful DC parks as much as possible. As you might imagine, as a cannabis consumer, I am really into food, so I try to check out as many of the new food offerings, particularly as places are starting to bounce back from the pandemic. You know, DC's food scene is just nuts. Try to catch as much live music as I can. Watch a lot of sci-fi.
Okay. We do have one of the best food scenes in the country. And it hasn't always been that way, but in the last 20 years, it's really, really grown into something.
I mean, I think it gives any other major city in the world a run for its money.
It really does. It really does. We're in the shadow of New York and Miami, and so even Philly. I think Philly, we're in the shadow of Philly, it seems like, but no, DC is where it's at. We got good food here. We got great chefs, great caterers. There's an event every day here. How could you not have good food? You know? So we're going to end. We end all these on the shameless plug portion of the show. You don't really sell anything. So like maybe talk about your organization, your mission, how you're helping people, how NORML is helping people, anything that you're just currently excited about. Give us like a minute and spout it out.
Well, we actually do sell merch that you can find on our website at norml.org.
There he is.
But in general, like NORML is an organization that is supported almost entirely by small dollar donors. Talking about people kicking in $5 to $10 a month. And that is what has sustained us for 50 years. We aren't beholden to any, single big philanthropists or any, MSOs or huge industry players. It's all just regular people helping support our efforts to end prohibition and protect cannabis consumers. So anything that that folks can do to help us towards that goal, even if it's $1 a month, is something that we really appreciate, because it does all add up, and it gives us the resources to be able to go out and do this work every day and spread this information, while also being able to take care of our families.
I'm convinced, and I'm talking to my crowd out here right now. Send NORML some money, and if you haven't, it's probably long overdue. Every one of us has benefited richly from the work that NORML has done. The stuff that we never see, but we always, you help us win. In short, you do. You're fighting the fight for us, and we sit here back, and as consumers, some of us are pushing forward, but most of us are just, we buy, we consume, and we talk, but not really putting the action or the dollars forward. So I think you're absolutely right. It's time for all of us to kind of put our money where our mouth is. No pun intended, really, but
Yeah, if you look at it, there's probably 17 or 18 million regular cannabis users in this country, defined as like people who, when polled, have used it within the last month. If every single one of those people put in $1, even once, or let alone on a monthly basis, we would be just blowing the doors off Congress right now and be able to fund much more significant efforts than we currently do in every single state.
Wow. Okay. You've inspired me today. We're going to set up something where we try to get people to donate some money. So we got to figure how that looks, but maybe we can kind of come up with something. I don't know, promote you guys as we're out in the field or something like that. You have a bucket, all this money goes to NORML, something. I don't know, but
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no doubt, man. No doubt. Hey, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
You really shared some great information with me today, our viewers. I think people really want to know where all this is going. And very rarely do you get a chance to talk to someone with your access and insight. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and thanks for hanging out with us on Friday with Friends.
Oh, anytime. I really appreciate it. And also for your viewers, NORML also has a bunch of tools that can help improve your activism and advocacy. If you go to our Learn page or the main page and hit the Learn tab, we've got fact sheets, we've got one-pagers, we've got all sorts of explainers, we've got a library full of cannabis policy research and medical research. So I highly recommend people check that out. It can really help inform your citizen lobbying, as well as even your conversations with friends and colleagues.
That's awesome, man. Friends, family members, you know what I mean? You got a kid who's coming in like, hey, you smell marijuana for the first time, and instead of coming down, go on the site, get educate yourself, and talk with them. That's good stuff. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you guys are here, and that you're the front line for all of us. So I want to clap it up for you. I want to clap it up for NORML, and really, really just congratulate you guys on the work you've been doing for a half a century.
Well, thank you for the stuff you're doing. It takes everybody. This stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum.
No, it does not. No, it does not. Most of us think it does, but no, it does not. And you go enjoy your Friday, enjoy your weekend. Thank you for your time today. We'll let you get out here and spend some time with those children. All right. Bless you and them, your whole entire family. Thank you so much, Morgan, man. And hopefully, if you're up to it, man, we can do this again. Hopefully next time you're doing it, we're having a conversation about legalization and how it just happened and what this is all looking like. So, don't be surprised if we're hitting you back up, for another few minutes on Zoom.
Oh, anytime. Thanks, Derek.
Thank you. And you're in DC, so we're going to get together, man. Maybe, have a beer and a sesh or something one day, all right?
I'm gonna hold you to it.
Please do. Hold me to it. Yes, sir. All right. I'll talk to you later, brother. Thank you so much.
Thanks.